over here in Durham, North Carolina. And of course, we've got the folks with Santa just like me here. And of course, that means that Santa Claus is in town. And of course, there's a whole heap of kids over here taking pictures with Santa Claus. As I've said before, I probably could have played that role this particular year and all in that space, but I was not doing that. And I'm actually supposed to go see the barber later on today if I can make it over there, if the kids don't stick around for a long period. Otherwise, it might be after the Christmas holiday that gets done. But it is going to get done very soon since it's about time for that to happen. It's been time actually for about a week or so, but definitely looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing Mr. Boyd and, of course, just having that barbershop conversation and all in that space. But I do know that at least our version of Santa Claus is here. And, of course, the kids are coming in on a steady pace, and they've been coming in on a steady pace for the last 3 days. That's right. They started on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they'll be back here on tomorrow as well. So actually, it was Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday now that I think about it. But they'll be here tomorrow. Then they'll leave right around Christmas Eve. So I think they get out around 2 or 3. And then that means hundreds, if not close to 1,000 of kids, but at least hundreds have been through here getting their pictures taken with Santa Claus and definitely enjoying that opportunity to tell them their wishes before Sunday gets here, and they get to enjoy that particular holiday and enjoy all the gifts coming their way, as well as the good cheer, and of course definitely be thinking about the meaning of the season and all in that space. I know a lot of folks, every time that Christmas comes around, are always wishing for peace on earth and a lot of other things that are in that wish list during the Christmas holidays. But that's what's going on here, and let me just tell you about a couple of quick news items, and then I'm going to bring in a very special guest that we've got in, a gentleman that has written a book about Santa Claus. Well, actually, the man behind Santa Claus, that being good old St. Nicholas, and all in that space. And then we'll bring in our regular panel as well. But if you're wondering about news items, the news items that I am seeing is that the January 6th panel has recommended barring Trump from holding public office. I'm sure that Dan Worthington might have some thoughts around that, and we'll see what he has to say in that space. Unfortunately, there can be a thing called the Grinch, and the Grinch can get in the way as well of other things, and sometimes the Grinch can bring some horrible weather, and apparently that's what's happening with our travel plans, because airlines have scrapped 4,400 U.S. flights as winter storms are disrupting the holiday travel plans. So that is one of the things that is going out. I know that when I came here to work, it was definitely a little bit on the chilly side and the drizzly side, even though it's cleared up, but it's definitely still cold. I think that they're talking about getting down to the teens on this particular day. So I know a lot of folks will be trying to make sure that their heat is still staying on and that they are being successful in that way. So it'll be interesting to see how this impacts United States weather, but it might be impacting other weather as well. And the Dow Jones has fallen on inflation data, and Tesla stock has risen higher on Elon Musk comments. So some folks may have some thoughts about that as well. And apparently, North Korea has sold arms to Russia's Wagner Group, according to what the U.S. Kind of folks that are in that kind of space have said, and all in that line. And by the way, if you're a fan, as I am, of chicken tikka masala, apparently the self-proclaimed inventor of that has passed away. So Ali Ahmed Aslam passed away at the age of 77. And I do like some of those Indian dishes, and that is one that I actually do enjoy, and all in that space. And apparently a French serial killer, Charles the Serpent Sabraj, was released from the Napoli jail, and all in that kind of way. So that's some of the things that we're seeing. And by the way, if you're wondering about Target, Target is recalling weighted blankets after reports of 2 girls unfortunately suffocating under one. So that's just some of the news that I'm seeing in the world, but we're going to get to something a little bit more lighter and a little bit more fun, even though I am going to mention 2 other things just quickly in the news. The Senate has passed a $1.7 trillion government funding bill that overhauls the U.S. election law, according to the fine folks over there at NBC. And a self-made millionaire that says that 90% of your success depends on this single skill. And apparently young folks are terrible at it. I'm going to have to find out what that one skill is. Maybe our guests can have their thoughts and all of that. By the way, if you were planning to get Christmas meal from DoorDash, you could be having a problem because DoorDash apparently is suspending operations through Saturday. So that could be problematic as well. But right now, we're going to bring in our special guest, none other than Wayne Van Der, and all in that ways, but Wayne Vanderwell. And definitely, I know you've got some great history about a very important person, that being St. Nicholas, and all in that line. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the man behind the legend of Santa Claus. And I know you've written a book about that and the gospel according to Santa Claus. And I know that he's even been involved in a, sometimes we hear about folks in the religious world that take vows of poverty. And if I understand something of your own knowledge of the man behind the Santa Claus legend, he was one of those folks that did that as well. So I'd love to hear more about the man behind Santa Claus. We all know that whether it's here at the Hayti Center or whether it's going to a mall or whether it's seeing him in the parades, there are a number of folks that are out there playing the role of Santa Claus, and it is very much an important role during this Christmas season. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around one, your own Santa Claus experiences, as well as how you came about learning about this important man that is the person behind this mythology that exists out there and everything.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. It's a wonderful time of year. Excuse me. It's early. I'm on the West Coast, so it's early here, and just waking up, getting my coffee. But thanks for having me, and Merry Christmas to you and all your viewers. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love telling the real Saint Nick story. It's how it came to me was back in 2008. It was a rough year for me, worst year ever. Actually, I went through a divorce, and that Christmas rolled around, and it was my first time being a single dad. And I was trying to figure out how to make Christmas more meaningful. And every year we read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, which I later learned the real title of that is A Visit from St. Nicholas. But I was reading it that year, and the first four lines, "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas would soon be there." And that was the first time I ever really thought about it. I mean, we read that poem every year, and I never really thought about St. Nicholas. We always hear Santa Claus. And he's mentioned four times in the poem. That's all they call him, is St. Nick or St. Nicholas. And so I started doing some research about his life, and during that Christmas season, trying to figure out how to make, I was disillusioned with the whole materialism of Christmas, with my kids, and I wanted to make it more meaningful to remind us, the real season's all about, the birth of Christ and, bringing salvation to mankind and and saving us from our sins. And so I wanted to bring the true meaning, make it even more meaningful. So when I learned about the true St. Nick's story, it turned out he was a man of faith, and he lived what he believed. He was sold out for God, and just had an incredible life. Just to summarize real quick, and then from there we can go a little deeper. But he was born in what's today Turkey. Back then it was Lycia, and he was born on the coast in a town called Patara on the coast of the Mediterranean in the Turkey. And so to wealthy Christian parents. And so if you look at the time, this was around 300 AD. So this was just a couple hundred years after Christ was around. And so here he had wealthy Christian parents, but Turkey was a Greek society, so they had all their mythology, and then they were ruled by the Roman Empire, so they had the Roman army all around them, and then the Romans had their mythology. So if you can imagine being Christians during that time and then being wealthy, to me that's a miracle unto itself. And sadly, tragically, what happened is a plague hit when Nicholas was young. His parents were, of course, loving, caring people, helping people, and they got the plague and they died. And what's significant now, this book's been out for a few years, but here we don't call it a plague, but we just went through a pandemic, which is a plague. And so we have some firsthand experience on some of the fears and that come with that. But long story short, Nicholas lost his parents during that time, and he inherited their vast fortune. And that's when he was still young, but he felt a call on God. He felt a call on God for his whole life. But at that point, he felt called by God to give it away to the poor, the sick, the suffering. And that started the whole giving, generosity, legend, spirit around Santa Claus, Saint Nick. He went on to become a priest and bishop in the Christian church at the time. It wasn't officially the Catholic Church at that time. It was a Christian church, but he went on to become a priest and bishop. And then he was persecuted by Emperor Diocletian during that time and spent 5 years in prison. So Santa Claus has done time in the big house. Who knew that?
Right.
And so, I mean, this is an incredible story. And this is right before Constantine came to power and then eventually made Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire. But Nicholas was around during that time when Constantine took power. And but I started learning all these fascinating facts about St. Nicholas. And I was just amazed how, first of all, I didn't know a lot about it, but then I'd ask people around and then they didn't know about it. And so I'm a visual person. So as I'm reading and learning more about Nicholas, this movie's forming in my head. And so eventually, that Christmas, I got to share the true meaning of Christmas through the eyes of the real Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, with my kids. And that was really special to be able to share that aspect that, hey, look, Santa Claus over there at the mall, that's all great, but his real name is St. Nicholas and he's real. And this is who he was. And he loved God. He loved Jesus. He loved people. And he had all these tragedies in his life, prison and losing his parents and persecution, but he overcame it all with his faith, with love, joy, peace, forgiveness. Be joyful always, be prayerful, thankful in all circumstances. That's a theme throughout the book.
Sounds like a great theme. I would be curious to know, and I'm going to bring in some of our other panelists and everything, what you think that Santa Claus would think about this current state of Christmas and the current state of the way that the holidays are celebrated here in the United States and around the world. So I was wondering what your impression is of how St. Nicholas would think of the holidays as we are currently celebrating them these particular days.
Yeah, as far as the materialism, I think, of course, he'd be very disappointed with all that. But I think, knowing that Christ is around the world, there's Christians around the world, I think he would be touched by that. And I think he had a big part of that because of his location on the Mediterranean Sea. He was in Patara, but then he was the Bishop of Myra, which was a sea town on the Mediterranean. And he's the patron saint of sailors and prisoners and children, of course, but sailors who would come visit his ports and see his generosity, and he'd pray for them and bless them. And his legend went out from there. There's thousands of St. Nicholas churches around the world spread out. So I think on that side, of course, he'd be disappointed with the whole materialism and the loss of, celebrating the birth of Christ as a whole. But I think he would be touched to see that, that the gospel has spread around the world, even in, China and, these countries that, we wouldn't imagine it, that there are believers around the world, but there's still work to be done for sure. And the generosity needs to keep coming from, especially the Christian family around the world. We need to be the light of the world, the salt of the earth, and stepping out more. And I think that's probably one thing he'd say.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What were your own Christmases like? And I'd love to hear from Lee and Dan. I remember going to my grandparents' house. Actually, would sometimes go to both grandparents' houses when they were living as a child and everything, and particularly the ones that were up there in rural North Carolina. There would sometimes be, of course, the Christmas trees, and even Mom has a Christmas tree up now with the ornaments and all of that. My nephews actually helped put it up earlier this month and everything. But I was just wondering your own Christmas experiences, because I definitely enjoyed hanging out with my cousins and, of course, unwrapping the gifts as a child. And, of course, just having that family bonding time. And, of course, sometimes definitely going to the church services that were associated with the Christmas holidays as well. But I just wanted your take on the holidays and your own reflections. And maybe Lee and Dan want to share theirs as well.
So you want to start with me?
Let's start with you, Wayne.
Okay. Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and so the midnight mass was a big thing. And when I was young, my dad had just gotten out of the Marines. This was at the end of Vietnam, and so we were extremely poor, but we were fortunate to have some neighbors step up. This is one of my biggest memories as a child. I was actually 5, and my dad had moved back down to DC. We were in Michigan and trying to find work to maybe move us back down to the DC area. And so he wasn't around, and all the neighbors stepped in and just gave us this wonderful Christmas. And I didn't really comprehend that. I learned that story later. But one thing I remember from that Christmas is I was sick as a dog. We were listening on the radio to where Santa was, well, he's crossing the Atlantic now, all that. And, but I was just sick. And so I went to bed and, and literally sick, throwing up and everything. But then Christmas morning, I woke up and I was like completely healed. Like I had never been sick. And I just remember that morning, just number one, being excited at all the presents and everything, but then also feeling great. But I remember zeroing in on the nativity. We always had the nativity central in the living room. And just looking at that baby Jesus, just knowing somehow at 5, like, in my 5-year-old little brain, just connecting something special about feeling better. Christmas morning, it's his birthday, and that little baby in the manger. But that's kind of how I grew up, with the Catholic Church, the family traditions, going to Pittsburgh and seeing family there, and then midnight mass kind of thing. And so those were my main memories.
Yeah. What about you, Lee? I'm sure you've got some memories of Christmas as well, and maybe even have some thoughts or some questions for Wayne about this book that he's written about the true story behind Santa Claus, Saint Nick, and all of that. But I'd love to hear some of your insights as well.
I'm going to go in a different angle that you probably expected, Mark. First, I want to welcome you, Wayne, to the podcast. It's good to meet you. And you mentioned before about the unfortunate stress on commercialization of Christmas. But more so than that, which I think is sad, not just for Christmas, but for America and for the world, is the push away of the valuing of religion, specifically Christianity throughout the world, but in general, religion, where the world has become more secularized, whether away from particular religions, but also the values, Judeo-Christian values. I just think it's very sad for this time of year and just in general where we're heading. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. As a culture, as Americans have left the church and gone their way, it affects our culture, and we're seeing it over the last 70 years as we've taken God out of school and our culture in general. We're seeing the effects of it in the immorality.
There seems a lack of even tolerance for religion and for God within government and within our schools.
Yeah. For me, coming from a biblical worldview, we have an enemy, Satan, who's going around wanting to kill, steal, and destroy anything that's good and holy of God. And I think that's, really it comes down to a spiritual battle. For me is really, it all begins. I didn't want to get too heavy theologically, but
it's okay.
No, we don't mind getting heavy on a lot of different topics. Dan is actually very heavy, and I'm going to bring Dan into it and everything. But I do know that one thing that I love that takes place during the holidays, but is also somewhat sad, is that, and it's kind of coming back to what Lee was saying, is that while we definitely have a very secular view of sometimes in the world, when the holidays come around, and particularly Christmas, a lot of times that's when we pay attention to those that are less fortunate. Because I do know that even here in Durham, there's a big push with the rescue missions to feed hundreds, if not thousands, of folks that are struggling. And I know that that goes on in California as well. And I sometimes wonder where that is during the rest of the year, because we get it during the holiday seasons where they'll have those big Christmas meals and definitely around Thanksgiving. But, you know, there's another, if we take Thanksgiving is November and Christmas is December, there's another 10 months of the year where those folks don't necessarily have that same kind of support and that same kind of benefit of those kind of meals on a regular basis. I mean, I'm glad that we do that during the holiday seasons, but I sometimes wish that it was more done consistently throughout the year and all in that space. I get around by mass transit. I was on the bus earlier, and there was a gentleman that was complaining about his current living situation because he was looking for a job. I don't think he was getting the family support that he thought he was going to get, or some of the friend support, and apparently was even facing some housing crisis as well. So I'm going like, those are the kind of folks that I think need help all year round. But I just wanted your take on that, Wayne. And would you like to see some of this spirit of giving that we get during Christmas held even more during the rest of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you know, it's highlighted during this time of season, the giving season. But yeah, absolutely, we'd love to see it. Especially, and again, I put the weight back on Christians. To me, it's ultimately our responsibility to step up in all spheres of life, you know, politically, socially, emotionally, meeting needs of all people in all areas of life. And I did jail ministry for 8 years, and you know, I just think of where I live. You know, there are continual, you know, the food bank that goes year round, and there are year round things, but you know, we as Christians tend to step up more around this time of season. Well, really, we need to be doing it year round. And again, just being, you know, the difference makers in society, and we should be the influencers in our culture. And that's something that we've fallen short of.
Yeah, you mentioned the jail ministries, and I've had some friends that have done some work in that space as well. And I'm sure Dan's got some questions and some thoughts as well. But you mentioned that, and I know that I've got friends that are of different faiths, a variety of different faiths. And I was just wondering, as one that worked in the jail ministry, how you dealt with that. Because I've got a friend that actually works at Duke University, and I know that she does some work in that space. And I do know that sometimes there is conversations among the different faiths, whether that's Islam, whether that's Christianity, whether that's Hindu, because our usual host is part of the Indian community and all in that space. But I was just wondering, how did you deal with the different faiths when you went into the jail ministry as a devout Christian? Because definitely I get the impression that you are a devout Christian, but I know that within those prisons are a lot of folks that have different types of faith, and I know that you're probably trying to help them on their faith journey while also maybe letting them know about your own faith walk and all in that space. But I was just wondering how you dealt with those, because we do know that there are active communities of different faiths of all sorts that are in those prison environments. I was just wondering how you dealt with that.
Yeah, our jail back in Reno, it was they had it divided where you know, different faiths had different set hours every week. So like our time was 7:30 to 8:30 every Sunday night, and so a unit, there were about 17 units. A unit would have an opportunity to go that time, and they would just announce, hey, you know, such and such church is here. They're non-denominational. You know, who's interested? And we could take up to 20 people. And so the first 20 that signed up would come. Most of them would be, you know, have some sort of Christian faith background. Some would have others, and they were just curious. Some just wanted to get out of the cell for an hour and would come check it out, but we didn't care. We're just like, hey, you're all here to hear the word. And we just share some sort of biblical lesson with them. Some sort of message with, you know, obviously right out of the Bible, and just love on them as best we can and pray for them during that time. So it was a very positive experience. And yeah, the other religions had their times too, but the majority of the ministries that were up there, I'd say, are probably 25 different ministries, including like AA, NA, and all, you know, addiction type organizations, but majority of them were Christian based. Some non-denominational, others denominational, but yeah, Christian based for the most part. So it was positive, my experience.
Yep, sounds like. Dan, I'm going to bring up Sasha because I know Sasha is our gentleman from Canada, originally from Ukraine, and definitely spent some time in the Russian system as well. So he's one of our experts about what's going on in the Ukraine-Russian war and all along those lines. I'll bring him up, and he might have some thoughts. He's been in the back listening and all in that space. But Dan, I'm turning it over to you to see if you've got any questions or thoughts about Christmas, and particularly around Wayne's book and what he's doing in the discovery of the true story behind St. Nicholas.
No, I think
First of all, Merry Christmas to all. Second of all, I would like to mention that unfortunately, people in Ukraine are suffering through this horrible war, which was obviously launched by Mr. Putin. And unfortunately, you cannot blame just one man for this war. Obviously, he has a great support in the country. There are perhaps some people who are not with him all the time and every time. But unfortunately, by being there, by voting for him, by paying their taxes, for which the ammunition and weapons Putin is being able to make, which are killing Ukrainian people, distracting infrastructure, and bringing horrible suffering to all Ukrainian citizens. But I think with the help from the West, US primarily, Ukraine will prevail. And last visit of its president, Mr. Zelensky, was great statement. First of all, that he was able even to travel from Ukraine, which is fighting, and Russians have a great way of surveillance. So it was very dangerous for him to do so, yet he did. And I was very ecstatic to see his appearances in Washington. And hopefully in next few months, Ukraine will be victorious. And with Ukraine, all the Western civilization will be, because Russian civilization is on its course, if possible, to distract Western civilization, Western way of life. And that's why it's punishing Ukraine severely for its wishes to join Western civilization, its values, by joining NATO, joining European Union and other institutions. Speaking about religion, Ukraine is a very interesting country. That there are several different religions. One is Orthodox, and that Ukrainian Orthodox Church is absolutely separated and different from Russian Orthodox Church. The Russian Church is just a servant of the Russian government. Ukrainian Orthodox Church is a unique in its way to allow its constituencies, places to worship. There is very strong Catholic Church in Ukraine. It's coming back from the times that more fairly large part of territory of Ukraine was a part of Poland, including cities like Lviv and Ternopil and many others. So the Catholic Church is doing very, very well in Ukraine as well. And of course, there are a lot of minor churches and religions, such as Greek Orthodox, Judaism, Islam to a lesser degree. And I wish Ukraine will prevail, and it will happen anytime soon. Thank you.
Hey,
Sasha, just got a quick question for you. How important was it for Zelensky to come here in person as opposed to have talks over the telephone or Zoom with our president?
There is a certain distinction between Zoom appearances or any other devices to real meeting. Also, I think, I'm pretty sure he's talking to Biden quite often through Zoom or maybe telephone or any other means. But what was important is an opportunity to address all members of Congress and Senate on joint
And that
session.
can only be done in person. Okay.
That probably, well, still technically speaking, maybe it could have been done, but effect would be very different. And also, don't forget that prior to being president of Ukraine, Zelensky was a professional actor and, in fact, very successful one. So he could use his artistic skills as well and his means of persuasion to do what he did. Look, English is not his mother tongue, so his English perhaps was not perfect, but I think he was able to um, to elevate and bring home his message.
I'm glad
Thank
you
you.
brought that up.
And he was always, when he was talking, remember several times, he was talking about American people. He was not talking about the Republicans or Democrats or this people or that. He was approaching American people. And his message was that our victory is our common victory. It's a victory of a free world against tyranny. That's all there is.
I'm glad you mentioned that because there's actually a commonality between both of our conversations and everything. And I'd love to hear Wayne's thoughts about this because you heard me earlier mention that self-made millionaire said that there was a quality that many folks, including our young people, are not that great at. And one of those qualities he was talking about was actually the whole notion of rapport with people. And I know that is very important if you're going to go give that letter to Santa Claus, which a lot of folks don't even know how to write letters these days and everything, or even you're going to ask Santa Claus what you want and all in that space. So they were saying that whether it is navigating relationship, problem solving, getting clients, public speaking, a number of these other things, we don't always do that good. And apparently it is a skill set that is not being encouraged these days and all in that space. There's even some folks that are not even going to interviews dressed all that well either. But I'm just wondering your thoughts about this notion of rapport and the importance of rapport, because like I said, I remember the old days of writing letters to Santa Claus, and I don't know how many kids, including my nephews, would even know where to start with the writing of a letter and all in that space. So I'm gonna start with you, Wayne, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as to rapport and the communications abilities that are out there, and whether that's something else that we've lost that we used to have back in the day, because I definitely remember many folks that used to enjoy writing that letter. And like I said, we've had hundreds of kids coming by and they definitely know how to talk to them, but I don't know that they're talking to him effectively, because they might be talking to him ineffectively if they're trying to ask him in a rude way. And I'll just put it that way. But I'm just wondering your thoughts about the state of communications, and do you think that we are doing a good job of addressing anybody, whether that's Zelensky talking to Biden or the young kids that are coming here talking to Santa Claus? I'd just love to hear your thoughts around how you feel we're doing as a society in the sense of communications.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to address that real quick. I just want to mention to Sasha, I appreciate his heart and and his information and his insight on what's going on, and just knowing, just please know that our hearts are with you and the Ukrainian people, and even the Russian people who don't want to be a part of this. Our hearts are with you, our prayers, our financial support, and of course our spiritual support. So please know that you are very much on the forefront of our thinking here in America. And we have many Ukrainian Americans here that that we love and support as well, that still have families back there. So thank you for being here and sharing what you've shared. On that note, as far as communication, I'm an educator. I'm a retired school psychologist, and just to see what happened with the education system the last 2.5, 3 years with COVID, kids are in school, they're out of school, they're Zooming, they're not Zooming. I mean, it's just been tragic what's happened, in particular, the last 2-3 years. I mean, it's just been crazy. And so, there's definitely a breakdown there as far as educating our children and them not being in the class regularly. to learn those communication skills. But even before that, again, what we were alluding to earlier, just the breakdown of the Judeo-Christian values over the decades of family, the importance of family, and respect, I think has gone down over the decades. Honor parent, the fifth commandment, honor thy mother and father, has gone downhill. Respect for authority, respect for each other, and has gone down. So, that's something definitely we need to improve on. And I'm thankful that the COVID's still there, but at least the kids are back in school and things. There's some sort of semblance of normality returning to hopefully get that back on track. As far as, but I'm a big believer on education really starts with the family, but unfortunately the families nowadays, especially as they're not faith-based as much as they used to be, and families are broken. And I'm maybe a couple years younger than some of you guys, but you probably grew up in times where you probably knew your aunts and uncles, and you mentioned your grandparents, and you saw them and you were connected to them. There were probably a lot of them in the same neighborhood, where nowadays everyone's spread out all over the place, and they don't have that family unit that they used to. They don't have the grandmothers keeping track of the grandkids and being real with them, and telling the parents, you need to, I shouldn't say spank that boy or whatever, but you know what I'm saying. You should be disciplined. We should be disciplining more, and whatnot. So that's my thought.
No, and Wayne, just along those same lines, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I did not realize that you were a school counselor when I found out about you and about the book and everything, but there's been a real spike lately in the way that kids are treated. I know that there's been a lot of talk about teen suicides and other things that have been out there in that space. And I was just wondering, as a counselor, why do you think that is occurring? And what are some of the things that we as a society can do to improve that? Because I do know that has been a problem, not just there in California, but around the nation, where we're seeing a spike in teen violence, teen suicides, and other things that are going on in society. And I was just wondering your take on that as you were in that space.
Wow, you are asking some heavy, heavy questions. We're going deep today. But that's okay, because for me, I'm as a school counselor and a school psychologist, and so I was there to help the kids and love on them and be there for them as much as I can. But again, I think it all goes back to the spiritual, the lack of spirituality that we have in this country, and again, that's I'm coming from a biblical worldview, and I truly believe, the Bible teaches values and love. And if you look at our country, we don't value life. I mean, just in general. I don't know you gentlemen, but I believe all life matters, and that's how I was taught, and that's what I taught my kids, and anybody and everybody I come in contact with. All lives matter, and definitely support the Black Lives Matter because of all the persecution they've gone through. But reality is all lives matter, even from the womb. But that's not taught in America. And so kids aren't dumb. They see that. They see that, well, if those lives don't matter, and, we see the senseless killing and the brutality around the world and the wars, and, then life must not be that important. And for me, Jesus, it all goes back to that little manger 2,000 years ago. We're talking about persecution, Ukraine, when Jesus was born, the Romans, were persecuting the people at that time, and they were dark times. And here, this baby was born in a manger, whose whole purpose was to bring hope to the world and bring salvation and to reconcile us back into a loving God who wants us to be with him. And so to me, that's what society's missing out on. And that's where we as Christians really need to be sharing the good news. And I'll be honest, that's what came out of this book. I didn't intend to be an author or anything. It was just, I just feel like God downloaded this story into my head. We all know who Santa Claus is. Santa Claus's life was, the gospel of love, joy, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And that's what this time and season's about. When I sign my autograph on the book, I sign, may the spirit of Christmas be with you all year round. And that's really my heart, is that that it's not just during the season of generosity, but that we're generous all year round as Christians.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You asked for a lighter question. So what was the best gift that you ever gave your kids and everything? Because I'm sure there must be a gift that resonated with them. And I don't know how many kids you have and all in that space, but what is the gift that they still talk to you about to this day? And maybe it was a gift that was a gift that they joke with you about as well, because I know that I can tell you one of mine is I was actually rushing to get a gift for my dad, and I got him a poster, and he was like feeling that I did not put enough time to actually find a gift of substance in that particular year, and that was decades ago and everything, and I can't really argue with him because I was probably doing that Christmas rush and didn't necessarily put a lot of heart into finding him the gift when I probably could have done a better job. So I'll tell it myself in that sense. So I do know that I was not doing the best in that particular time. Fortunately, it was decades ago, and it hasn't impacted our friendship and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, a great gift or a bad gift that your folks still resonate with.
That first Christmas, when I was learning about St. Nicholas and newly divorced and money was tight. And so I told my kids, look, I'm not about having, I'm about doing. I'd much rather do things with you and make special memories and have fun than buy you things that are going to be in a yard sale next summer. And in their 9-year-old and 11-year-old minds at the time, they're like, okay, so we just did stocking exchanges, some candy and some little things. But what I told them was, what I'll do is I'm going to save up, and next summer, we were in Reno, Nevada. I grew up back east. I said, I'll save up and I'll take us back east to go see, all the grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and all. And they loved that. And they were part of the planning. And so even though it was 7 months away, it was something we would talk about, and they had something to look forward to. And that was kind of the tradition that we did, was we would do things together versus, buy a lot of things for each other. And a simple thing that my son, one of my memorable gifts from my son was, all it was a little vase with some rocks in it, and the little tongue compressors that you go to the doctor, little wooden tongue compressors. And all he did was write things that he liked about me or loved about me. I love that you gave us a cool last name. Like I had anything to do with our last name, but he liked our last name. I love that you take us places. I love, and that was.
I'm sorry, wait. How much of your name is your last name? How much is your middle?
Vander Wall is the last name.
That's all last name.
That's all last name, yeah. Yeah. So it's Wayne Allen is my middle name. So Vander Wall, yeah. And so anyway, so that's one of my memorable. That's memorable for us. And actually, we just did a trip together. They're 23 and 25 now. My daughter's in New York. And I just flew her back the first week in December when everything was cheaper. And they work jobs that work over the holidays anyway, and they'd rather do that and make extra money. And so I flew her back, and then we went to some beaches here in California for our Christmas. That was our little Christmas together. And so we still do that, when we have opportunity. They're grown and living their lives now, but yeah.
That makes sense. Hey, Lee, is there any gifts that you remember from your Christmases that were either good or bad? I know a lot of people remember the infamous fruit cakes that some people get during the Christmas holidays, and that is not anybody's favorite, depending on who's doing it, because sometimes they're way too sweet or way too not having the best taste in all in that space. And I also know that there's that habit of like those gifts that you see in the office parties and all in that space. And now that we're going back to offices in some cases, and some of those gifts that are like almost intended to be gag gifts in that kind of line. But I was just wondering some of your good thoughts in the gift and holiday traditions.
I'll give you my thoughts before I hand off to Dan. Both on something Wayne said and something you said, Mark. Wayne, in terms of the time season of giving, it's not only giving of things. I think more important is giving of time. Parents, and I'm guilty of this also, we spend our time away from children, and they really crave that special time together more so than the gifts. They remember the time and the times and the things that we've done with them. And Dan and Mark, you mentioned before about those less fortunate, but holidays also are difficult for sometimes broken homes, as Wayne can express, but also for those times that the holidays where some people are missing from last year. Not but everybody made it through this year. And I'll just share something with you, and not in detail, but my oldest son was born, I guess, Christmas Eve, December 24th in the evening. Unfortunately, he passed away when he was 11 years old. So his birthday, which is Saturday, is a happy but a sad time. It's a mix, both for me, my wife, and for our other kids who knew him, because he was still a big part of our lives, and they all remember growing up with him. But his presence obviously is missing.
Yeah, no, I can definitely.
David, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, Merry Christmas to everyone. I have to say that we honor the Savior and Redeemer of the world, Jesus Christ, this time. He was the great Jehovah of the Old Testament. He was testified of by Isaiah. We sing the songs from Isaiah. He's wonderful. He's Counselor. He's the Almighty God. He's the Everlasting Father, and He's the Prince of Peace. Like I said, He was foretold from the beginning of time. He came to redeem man because of the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And He is the Redeemer of the Old Testament, the New Testament, today and forever. He is the resurrection and the life. I lost my wife to cancer 23 years ago. And prior to her passing, she was visited by the Lord Savior, Jesus Christ, in a vision, in a dream. A man, when she was very young, had abused her. And Christ said, this man begs of your forgiveness. And so that was both a healing experience for her and a redeeming act for the man. And also a capstone of her life, having been visited by the Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ, to say, well done, good and faithful servant. So, the thing is that the key to the world, the solution to the world, is faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and planting the seed of faith in our hearts to have the miracles of His blessings to be able to be open in our lives. When we are wicked and violate the laws of God, we are cut off from His blessings. He wants to bless us. He loves us. And the problem is we're living in an ever more increasingly wicked world. The Western world is becoming more and more wicked. That's the problem. We're told that if we're wicked, we will be destroyed. If we're faithful and loving and kind and seek the Lord Jesus Christ as the center of our life, He will bless us. But I think we're at the end of times. And I think that, now's the time for all people of faith to rise up and praise their Lord God and to be faithful and obedient so that we can prepare for His second coming. And so that is my 2 bits to this whole thing.
Hey,
To
Sasha.
mention something very quickly. I've listened to a brilliant video presentation of American pianist Murray Piraia when he was interviewed, and he was playing at that time a concert with the music of Bach primarily. And what he said was that, look, there are a lot of atheists in this world, and a lot of brilliant literature is written about atheism, how good is it, and well structured and done. And yet something happened when you listen to, for example, Bach, Chaconne for violin solo, which he wrote, by the way, on the death of his first wife. And when you listen to that, all thoughts about atheism, it's complete garbage. It has absolutely no foundation of anything because you listen to all their wonderful scientific discoveries and thoughts or so on, and a few chords of that piece absolutely destroy it without even saying a single word. It's just not there, it disappears. And actually, I'm surprised about one thing, why the today's Catholic, and not only Catholic, but all churches, the Christian, of course, churches are not relying on the greatest pieces of art, which was a part of the Risorgimento and other movements in Europe in 500 years ago, Renaissance, because 99% of all that is based on Christian values and the Christian themes. Why this, and of course, music such as Bach's best pieces, but almost any piece, I should say, is not used for entice people. Same as the believers and non-believers or whoever they are, just to be part of it, because this is so significant.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Hey, Wayne, one of the other things that and Tasha may have some thoughts around this as well. You know, there was a lot of thought, and you mentioned his Greek background and everything around Saint Nicholas. And I know that historically speaking, sometimes people will look at the Russian aspect of Saint Nicholas as well. And I don't know if the book touches on that at all, because I do know that he is definitely the patron saint of the Russian Orthodox Church and all along those lines. So I was wondering if any of that part of the history is touched on, because I do know that you mentioned that he was from Turkey, and I actually have some roots in Turkey myself. My dad having been stationed in the Air Force and having lived there when I was an infant and all in that space. But I was just wondering your take around St. Nicholas's role with the Russian Orthodox Church, if you had done anything with that in your research.
No, I'm familiar with it, but I didn't include that in the book. I focused on his early, middle years, as he slowly became today's Santa Claus. But yeah, he's a patron saint of Russia, the Netherlands, I think of Greece as well. And again, he's just embraced worldwide, because we all gravitate towards that. We all hunger for goodness and joy and generosity, and so. And
Wayne, I do have one question though, because the image of Santa Claus is this roly-poly guy with the nice beard and all of that, and all in that space. Now you said Saint
You could
Nicholas
relate.
lived a life of poverty and all in that kind of way and everything. So I was just wondering, what would his thoughts be, the real Saint Nicholas, of the imagery that is out there of him, and even this whole notion of running around with reindeers and elves and things along those lines. So I was wondering, in your ideas and in your books, what do you think he would think of this current imagery of what the thought of Santa Claus is at this particular time?
Yeah, I think just a little I know about Saint Nicholas. I would think he'd have a good sense of humor and have a chuckle about it. But reality is, some of the older paintings you see, he's actually very thin and gaunt, and I'm sure he is probably very sturdy, a hard worker, helping people, and probably very fit, in his time. So yeah, the whole smoking a pipe and being overweight and all that probably wouldn't jive with him. The flying reindeer and stuff. He'd probably just shake his head and just like, oh my gosh, Lord help us, So
probably shake his head, even at the fact that people expect him to go through chimneys and all of that. And there's not that many buildings that I'm aware of that still have chimneys. So I'm still trying to figure out whether he has like a master key, because I think that was the current story that I heard, is he has a master key that can get you into all of these modern buildings and all in that space. So, I know that some offices will have a master key. So I guess he just got one giant master key that can get him everything from the White House to buildings that don't have chimneys and all along those lines. But definitely, I'm wondering, I think Dan and Lee are still trying to find that master key, just like I've been trying to find the Fountain of Youth and all in that space. It's one of those things that's out there, but we haven't discovered it. But I think that Lee actually does have it. He just won't tell us where that master key is. You can go ahead and break it down to us, Lee. You know where the master key is.
Mark, you know where it is. You know where the key is.
I know where the key
you
is.
You want to take one guess? Yeah, it's in your heart.
That is true. The key is in your heart. That is very true. That is a very important message, and all in that line. Well, like I said, we got to some serious things, including what was going on in the Ukraine. I definitely hope that everybody has a wonderful Christmas season.
Okay, Mark, I think Sasha wanted to add something.
I was going to go to everybody. I was going to end with Sasha.
When you touch the question about the role of St. Nicholas in Russia,
right.
You have to have in mind a few things. Number one, in Russia, the Christianity, or just for that case about any religion, was not a part of the people's upbringing and their traditions or anything. Russians are basically pagans who were turned into Christianity by sword of Vladimir Monomach, the Kiev Tsar. So unlike in the West, when Christianity was coming from the people, and Constantine had to adopt Christianity as a religion of Rome because the people wanted Christianity, and people were already believing in the Christianity, Jesus Christ, and so on. Now, so the Christianity in the West is a genuine coming from the people, and unlike in Russia, when it came from the top, and they never really made this people in Russia part of Christian world. And you can see now that's what's happening. And when people ask me, how come the people of great culture, such as Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, Pushkin, and so on, could do such atrocities in Ukraine? And I'm asking, what do you think, how many people who are doing this atrocity in Ukraine read Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or Pushkin or listen to Tchaikovsky? Because if they would do that, they would never did these atrocities, what they're doing now. Well, obviously, they never read that, they never listened to that music. They have nothing in common with their great predecessors. They don't have anything in common. It's completely different. It's an outcast of the world population, unfortunately, I must say so. Thank you.
No problem. Definitely hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and that they get all their Christmas wishes, including I know many people are wishing for peace on earth, even though we are in the middle of that war there in Ukraine. So it might be sometime in 2023 that it takes place, but definitely hoping that that takes place. And all along those lines, I did see that Pope Francis dressed down the Vatican bureaucrats and was definitely saying that they need to not be as caught up in maybe some of the worldly things as they have been, but maybe there's some people that are thinking the same thing about the Pope himself and all along those lines. And I did go to a Jesuit university and all along those lines, so we'll see what his actual Christmas address will say to the whole world and all along those lines. But definitely he was saying that there might even be some kind of rough goings within their bureaucratic structure and all along those lines. And I'm sure people could say the same thing about our own political folks here in the U.S. But hopefully 2023 will be a great year and a better year than 2022 and 2021. And we can start moving in a very positive and peaceful direction. At least that's my wish. And all along those lines, I'm going to go around, but I think I'll come back to Wayne to close it all out since he was our guest of honor. So I think I'll go to you first, definitely Lee, and then I'll go to Dan and then Sasha and then come to Wayne at the end. But Lee, any Christmas wishes that you want to give to folks as we get ready to get on out of here on this particular the day before Christmas Eve, and of course, then Sunday will be Christmas. Christmas actually falls on Sunday this year, so that is always a good thing when it actually falls on the day of religious observances for many people anyway. But definitely love to hear your thoughts around any final wishes or thoughts for this particular Christmas season.
I just want to wish everyone blessings and also to appreciate whoever is there. You know, because I mentioned before, we're not living forever. And for those of us like my mom, she's still alive. She's 88. I don't know how much longer I'm going to have her. Just appreciate what you have, the meaningful things in life.
No, I can definitely relate. I think my mom is 82 and definitely has some surgeries and other things coming up in 2023. And I lost both a uncle and a uncle's sister, because it was not my aunt, but it was his sister just recently, and everything within the last 5 months. So over the last several years, I've lost a couple of uncles and aunts. So you're right. You never know how much longer they'll be here with you. And definitely we will. We have them. We
don't know how long we're going to be here either.
That's very true. Dan, any thoughts that you want to pass on as well before I give it to Sasha and then toss it to Wayne to get us on out of here?
Sure. Merry Christmas to everyone. As Tiny Tim said, God bless everyone.
No doubt.
Thank
Sasha,
you, Dan.
Appreciate you, Dan. Sasha, any thoughts? And then we'll toss it to Wayne to get us on out of here.
Well, you just spoke about your mom, and my mom passed away 13 years ago. She was at an advanced age of 86. However, at that time, my goal was to make every day, whatever remains ahead of her, to make her happy as much as possible so she would enjoy, even if it's only 1 day or 3 days, whatever is left there. And I even did one interesting thing is on almost like 2 days, 3 days before her death, I came over to the hospital and I brought violin and I played for her. And she always
very
loved
sweet
me playing violin. And all the medical personnel there, they were amazed. I thought that they will ask me to leave the hospital right away. And so, but no, they were very supportive of me, and they said that if that makes her happy, and it was visibly so, then please do it. And I was very happy that I could provide a little bit of happiness to her in her last days.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, appreciate the sharing and everything. Wayne, I'm going to toss it to you. You are a guest of honor. I know when I first approached you yesterday, you said, I don't know whether I'll be there 30 minutes or an hour, but you stuck around for the whole time, and hope that you can get out there and get your
overtime
done over there. And I hope that we didn't chase you away, and hopefully you'll come back on some other times as well.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed this time. And I'm so blessed to have been here. So thank you. Thank you. So my last thought is the title is The Gospel of Santa Claus, and I titled it because Santa Claus, the real Saint Nick, the real Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, his gospel is the same as the gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's the good news of Jesus Christ, that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And that's what the central theme of the book is. And so I just want to take this opportunity just to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a blessed time, and just may you have a special time with your family, friends, and remembering those we've lost in the past, and embracing the special people in our lives today. So thank you again for having me.
No problem. Glad to have you. We're going to get on out of here. I think I've actually got a Kwanzaa celebration on Monday, so I may be back here on Monday, but I think Nick will be here, and of course we'll be here full throttle on Tuesday through Friday, and I've actually lined up some other guests that'll be coming on as well during the course of that week. But definitely glad to have you, Wayne, and like I've said before, hopefully we can get you to come back on other shows as well. But definitely you've seen some of the regular crew, and there are at least 2 or 3 others that pop in on a regular basis as well. But hopefully we'll see you back, and we're getting ready to get on out of here. There's other programming that'll be appearing on the network during the course of the day. But for now, we're done with the World Edition for this week, and wishing everybody a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Mark. Wayne, nice to meet you.